True story about golf there is that if you stay in prayer on the golf course, no. I've had plenty of shots, by the way. Should have hit a building, but they didn't. But that was an unusual day, I will admit. I don't know about you, but a lot of times I listen to music videos on YouTube. Don't really know what's popular today. I mean, I'm sure it's interesting, but I tend to gravitate toward the classics. That's just my problem, my hang-up. Don't worry about it. So you would people that listen to those things are reasonably tuned in on the finer things of life. That may be a bit of assumption. It's too much, but so I'm always amazed that on these videos, which are very serious music. For example, you may have the Rachmaninoff C-sharp prelude or something like that. Let's say that for illustration. And underneath it are the comments. And the comments are sometimes quite good. They'll be, this is an excellent performance. I really liked it. It blessed me, and so forth. But then it's amazing how many people drift into incredible insults and upbraiding of each other as persons and just horrible comments on these sites. And of course, I try not to, I try to look down there because there's some that say that I really like the music. They add to my knowledge, but the comments have gotten so bad I don't even bother to read them anymore. I just hide them. So I read the other day where Popular Science decided to cut all comments out on their website because they'd gotten so ugly and so negative and so vitriolic. And this seems to be a trend across the world of the internet, that people, lots of people who generally choose to remain anonymous are insulting and tearing each other down and full of vituperations. Where is all this coming from? Have we always been like that, or is this the first time we've had a forum to express our ugliness? What's happened to good manners and good taste? Well, I really don't know. It's kind of baffling. Maybe you have some answer for that. What's that? What's that? Ah, okay. It's good to have someone. Trolling, yeah, that's right. They're trolls. I forgot about that. Yeah, trolls used to be creatures that lived under a bridge that would charge you to go across the bridge, or they'd eat you. But nowadays they just hang out on the internet and insult people. Trolls are trolls, I suppose. Well, anyway, I mentioned all that to say that this communication problem that we've been talking about has apparently invaded our modern world, where people are using communication in such a negative way. Today, I spent a little time with just this one verse that James has in 5:12 as we wind down on the book of James. And it strikes you as rather abrupt in a sense, that suddenly we come upon this idea. Well, of course, I wanted to say welcome to class and all that, and here is my dream for you, that we won't see more of these temps, and that we even get out and plant a rose or two. So that's a fond hope I have, that will make something positive happen in terms of the weather. So we're grateful for the beautiful day we have today. Now remember that, just for a bit of review, that James has prepared us for a difficult world and for difficult circumstances by asking us to have what he calls macrothemia. Now, macrothemia is often translated patience, endurance sometimes, but the basic meaning is long passion. To have love for something over the long haul rather than, in America today, or maybe in the rest of the world, I'm not sure, we know how very, very well about doing love for the short term. We're really good at short passion. Short passion is our thing. We're very good at that. Fall in love, out of love, sometimes on the same day, people. I don't know how true that is. But to be passionate for something over the long haul is exceedingly difficult, and yet we have to develop a passion for the Lord and for his ideas that are enduring. So Christianity basically is not supposed to be boring. We're supposed to find again and again springs of renewal so that we may discover an exhilarating lifestyle as a Christian. So that gives us some pause. How do we get there from here, we ask? Well, remember that the Lord's goal, and James talks about this in 5:11, the Lord's goal in all of this, and it is a particularly interesting verse to me. He says to them, you know the Lord's goal. The Lord has a goal. Okay, it's a telos, T-E-L-O-S in Greek, which means the end of things, the goal, or the what you're aiming for. And the Lord has a goal in all of this, and that's to be accomplished, this patience in us and so forth, is to be accomplished only because He's compassionate and merciful. He's not like some celestial drill instructor who's going to call you a maggot and demand that you do locker box drill or all that stuff we used to do in the Marine Corps. But rather, by loving you and being compassionate, you encourage you to develop what's going to really make you happier in the long run. It's kind of what James reminds us of again and again. So when we look at this passage in James 5:12, it seems like rather abrupt, and he stops talking and begins talking about oaths. Like, why is that important? You know, why bring that up? But it fits the picture as a missing puzzle piece in a sense, because it's returning to the theme of communication again. And while you may not organize your book like James does, he tends to sort of bring a collection of ideas together, and they're all sort of united by a sub-theme that runs through the book. And the sub-theme, over and over again, is relying on God's wisdom to be able to communicate effectively and encouragingly. And now he returns to that theme, and rather suddenly. In this verse, as you notice, he says he's after the truth, really. That's kind of what he's after, the truth. The truth. And that's a tough topic. Let's look at what he says about it. Now, you say, well, okay, tell me what this has to do with truth. Well, it's pretty obvious if you think about it. We're using in that time, and I don't know whether they do it today or not, as much, probably not, but they were using oaths to sort of grade their language. And so that some language should be taken more seriously than others, and the way that they qualified that was by the way they use an oath. And Jesus illustrates this in the Sermon on the Mount, so I'll throw that up for you right now, chapter 5. Now, there was a huge discussion going on about what oath was more valid than another oath. So if I said to you, I swear by the temple that this is true, well, that wasn't quite as effective as if I said, I swear by the gold in the temple. You say, well, I don't get it. Well, you'd have to be a scribe to get it, you know. You'd have to be a religious expert. Now, one of the nice things about creating dogmatic theology is you need experts to explain it to you. And that's why we need priests and scholars, because we separate you from knowing as to why the gold of the temple is more important than the temple itself. Or I swear by Jerusalem would mean something, but I swear by the city of the great king, and they had all these gradations. And Jesus says, this has got to stop. This is ridiculous. What you're doing is you're making something more truthful, and you're trying to say, well, this is not quite as truthful, and you can't hold me to it because I didn't say it the way you think I did. It's kind of like you've got your fingers crossed. That's hard for me to do anymore, but I used to be able to do it real well. I could cross all of them at the same time. But, you know, when you talk to somebody, remember when you were a little kid and you put your hand behind your back and you cross your fingers, that it's supposed to make it okay, right? It's kind of like the calories you eat over the holidays, right? They don't count, right? And everybody laughs and goes along with that. We know they do count, and they begin counting very seriously in January. Now, he says, you don't have that kind of control to where you can say this is more truthful than that. So why don't we go for something radical? Yes, yes, and no, no. Say your yes, this is what I mean. No, this is what I mean. Now, some people think that means to be brutal. You know, I'm brutally honest, and I'm proud of it. In other words, I like to hurt everybody's feelings, and I'm good at it. That's not biblical either, because the way you say it is probably as important as what you say. So what was really going on then, though, were all these guys. Then you imagine a conversation like this, you see. And this, a high conversation again, bagels and all that, but you get the point, you know. You got this gang of people. Which one is really telling the best truth here? Well, how can we clear all this away, you see? That's kind of what James is wanting people to do. Get them away and get them to more honest, truthful, transparent communication. Now you say, well, what's important about it? Well, you know, I was talking today about the negativism that we see in politics. And of course we do. You see an inability, it would seem, of people together anymore. Just, you know, gridlock. And a lot of that's hindered by communication ideas and about the way people look at other groups and the polarization, et cetera. And you all know that. You're sophisticated people. But you say, well, what? You know, it's frustrating because you can't get anything done with this kind of attitude going on among our leaders. And look at the world in general, all these terrible, awful comments and what people say to one another and the instant way they insult each other and all. And I think James is saying, listen, if we had a community of people who didn't need to use any subterfuge, who could be transparent and honest with one another, that would be powerful in the world. That would be very powerful to think. There's a group over there that respects transparency and honesty so much, you don't have to worry about swearing by your Aunt Matilda's left hearing aid, you know? You don't have to be concerned about those things because they don't let things like that get in the way. You see what I'm saying? This would be a really wonderful group to be around, and that's what they're after, I think. So suppose somebody says to you, how do you like my hat? And you think, I'm supposed to be honest. And a person who thinks their honesty means brutality, but what you can often say something that doesn't hurt someone, but is the truth anyway. Now, if some lady came up to me and had this hat on, I'd say it's interesting. It certainly interests me a lot. Explain to me the meaning. There may have some, you see, but if I say something that stops the conversation, I'm never going to know. See, and that's what a lot of people think is honesty. Honesty is not stopping the conversation with an insult just because you think it's true. Oh, what about if this lady said the same thing to you? Now, which of those two do you prefer? Anybody? See, you don't like either one, do you? Now, say after me, it's interesting. You like, it's functional. Now, here's a woman that knows how to encourage people. You like my hat? It's functional. It's functional like those hats you could buy in New Orleans that have beer cans in them and a straw coming down in your mouth that you see people at games with. It's functional, I agree. Yeah. And if you're out there in the garden and so forth, this could save your life because you keep the sun from destroying you. Well, now, I think that, you say, well, isn't that a little subterfuge? Well, no, I think it's kind of following this idea that Paul has in Colossians 4:6. Notice what Paul says. Brutal honesty and using honesty as a weapon is not what we have in mind. So talk, be kind and pleasant. I think it says be seasoned with salt, which is kind of like make it palatable, make it something that lasts, make it something good, so that you can answer appropriately, because not everybody needs the same answer. Kid may be at a point where they don't need criticism, but you may have to build up to that in a way. So this is a little more complicated than you think to become that society of people who really tries to be constructive and yet honest at the same time. So let's think about this thing a little bit. Yeah, Larry? What a shock. Okay. That's what Pilate asked. So did he ever give you an answer? He never did me. I think he's just being cynical, don't you? Well, let's explore that idea. I think we're going to do a little bit of that in the slideshow here. Let's see where we go with it, okay? Now, anybody know where this is? My wife does. She knows where this is. One person. Okay, where is this? Where in the United States is this town? New Mexico, right. All right. What do you call that? They named it after a popular radio show. I don't suppose all of you are much too young to remember Truth or Consequences on the radio, right? Like, anybody here remember Jack Armstrong, the All-American boy? I almost got you, Rodney. You nearly raised your hand. He does, but he wasn't going to give away his experience in the universe, okay? Now, don't ask me why it was a publicity stunt, but if you don't tell the truth, sometimes you have to face the consequence. That was the idea of the show. Well, sometimes truth then helps you to really live a way. Now, here's a billboard that a wife took out, and this may explain something. I don't know. Can you read that? This is a real billboard. It's a real billboard. Can you read that? Consequences. The consequences, okay. Consequences. Yeah, consequences, okay. There was one on TV, too, the other day. Well, anyway, no sense going into all this, but kind of has a way of catching up, I'm afraid. So what you got to watch is don't let the truth be going one way and your story taking you the other way. Now, I remember today, again, Russ, in a good flash of insight, showed that, well, if we were to ask somebody to draw this and somebody to draw, see that idea of the different viewpoints, right? And yet, that's okay. Well, this is true. And so we have to take this into consideration, that we don't say of someone, well, they're not saying anything that's right, because they just may be looking at it differently. So we should give them a hearing before we dismiss it. That's what I'm trying to say. I think James would ask us to do that. So otherwise, just to make it up as you go along is to be like this character. Any of you remember this little cartoon character? Pinocchio, right? What's the story of Pinocchio? Pinocchio was made by an Italian puppeteer named Giuseppe, right? Very good. Giuseppe, who was lonely for a son, right? But not having a son, he made a puppet, a marionette, and named him Pinocchio. Somehow there's a good fairy involved in this somewhere, but and a cricket who represents Jimmy Cricket. Jiminy? Whoa, thanks. Jiminy Cricket, okay. And Jiminy Cricket represents his conscience, right? Is that right? Come on, get into the moral flow of this. Now, if something happens, Pinocchio finds out if he lies. What? You remember? That's right. His nose grows. So we see this. How many of you have seen political cartoons with some senator up there and it's like, yoink, you know? What are they trying to say, you know? Sometimes they'll even have a branch coming off of it. And that's it. Liar, liar, pants on fire. You know, it's kind of one of those things that we typically say about someone. So be a Pinocchio or your nose will grow. So, but now let's think for a moment how difficult it is sometimes to sort it all out. Let's say there's an automobile accident, right? There's an automobile accident. No one was really hurt too much. Maybe it's scraped a little bit, so you look at that. And there's 4 people who see this automobile accident. There are 4 witnesses, okay? And they're the 4, okay. A policeman, an auto mechanic, a lawyer, attorney, and a physician or doctor, medical doctor. Not a doctor of science, of philosophy, but valuable as they are, and they are valuable. But a medical doctor, okay. So there we have 4 people. Now, they see it, but when they see the first consideration, and I'll give them credit, the first consideration they each have is that I hope everybody's okay. You know, they're good people. That's what they want. But then they realize everybody's kind of basically okay. Then each one will have a little slant on the truth, right? So our policeman will say, this would be very natural for a policeman to look at it from this angle. Is that true? Is that what he's saying a truth? Absolutely. Does it cover all the truth about the accident? No, but it's an insight into it, right? So who's our next person? Auto mechanic. What do you think the auto mechanic might say? Possibly something like this. Was this the truth? Is this the whole truth? And nothing but the truth, so help him? No. But it's a view of the truth, right? So sometimes putting the truth together, it takes a little work from a lot of different viewpoints, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Here's our attorney, lawyer. What will you think she will say? You all know what you're thinking. Probably, would you say? Huh? Something like that, maybe? Worse? Okay, but there'll be some legal involvement here, right? Now we have our, doctor left, right. So what's he going to say? I didn't know whether this would make the doctors in the congregation mad or smile. I am so glad to see you smile. He's not a real doctor, right? We know that. But exactly. But still, that's what people I understand, come up to him on the street and ask him for prescriptions. Well, anyway, I think we get that. And what do you think a doctor would say? Well, I'm not being one, but this might be what you'd say, something like that, wouldn't you? Kind of, sort of. No, okay, well, on a good day. I mean, well, you might say they need to get checked out or something like that. And what are each of these four viewpoints? They all represent what we bring to a situation, what we bring into a situation. The big mistake would be if one of these people believed they had the whole truth and everybody else's truth was wrong. Now, this is not saying truth is relative. It's just saying the truth is so enormous sometimes that it takes a lot of us working together to get it right. And there are a lot of different viewpoints on things. It doesn't mean they're all relative, because what's wrong is wrong. You're be entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your facts, okay? Facts are facts. Now, for some reason, people have a need to shortcut this hard work to get at truth. And this is the place where the individual comes along and says, what? Trust me. I'll save you all that work. You say, well, people won't fall for that. Excuse me. Is that right? They won't fall for that. They won't follow somebody like this. They won't follow a demagogue. I should remember the guy who said, Ein Volk, ein Führer, ein Reich. And millions followed him. So we have to watch out for people who are going to solve the problem for us, and they've got all the answers, you see. You got all the answers here, just step right up. Jim Jones said that. They got 900 people killed. That doesn't mean you should stay a skeptic or anything, but you need to be balanced. You see, truth is designed, I think, to guide us. I want to read you a passage that is over in Ephesians, one of my favorite books. Here he's talking to people who had come out of paganism. And in chapter 4, he says, don't spend your time on covetousness, things like that. Verse 20, you did not learn the Christ that way. And were taught in him, just as truth is in Jesus. Truth that says that truth is not some isolated reference stuck off of here in some ecclesiastical museum that you can go consult. Truth must find its way into your life. It must become your guide. Maybe like Diogenes, the dog philosopher, cynic philosopher, who went around with a lantern in broad daylight in Athens. And somebody said, why are you doing this, Diogenes? He said, I'm looking for an honest man. And one day it is even said, there's a story, that Alexander the Great came to Athens. And he'd heard about Diogenes, and he came over to him and he said, "Oh, philosopher, yeah, what is it, king? I've decided to grant you a favor. What do you want?" And Diogenes looked at him and said, "If you would, king, move over a little bit. You're blocking the sun." I mean, what kind of a guy you're going to find like this, you know? I mean, there's an honest answer. I like that. Alexander the Great was not happy about that, but he didn't have him killed, so progress. True. Now, I don't know about you, but this is not my idea of exploring a town, you know? This is, by the way, called a trust game. You're supposed to trust the leader. Yeah, lots of luck. It looks to me like it might be a game engage in if you need your knees repaired, but whatever. I don't want to be, this is like the blind following the blind. That's what happens if you don't let the truth guide. You're going to really end up where you don't want to be. The Bible warns us about that. Now, what it says is only what is true will survive. It's not like all these options are going to last. Only what is true will survive. If you don't believe it, just check out this statue that you'll find over in Bulgaria, I believe. Where's Stalin? Well, they took him away, but they left his boots on the statue. Is that not a good reminder of something about somebody who thought he was ruling the world and telling everybody what to do? He was going to kill you if you didn't agree with him? Where is he now? You can't even fill his boots anymore. The lie simply cannot last. Well, I was fascinated to run into something and about the truth of God, and see what you think of this. It's a little small, but I think if you can read it, maybe you can. The truth of God is a lot bigger than any person can imagine. You can't get a grip around it or take it all in. It takes time, and it even takes a community to help you, in a sense. You can't lasso it, trap it, or tame it. Now, I've heard people say, today I'm going to speak the truth to you, and it turned out they were speaking their party line that they hadn't even spent time investigating themselves. The party line. We can be awed by the truth, obedient to the truth, shaped by the truth, but we cannot reduce it to a list of human propositions. So, people try to do that, what happens? A hilltop in Bulgaria, 1981. Communism was built by the Bulgarian Communist Party. It was considered to be the finest monument to the solidarity of the proletariat ever put together. Beautiful mosaics, a huge mob of a crowd. This is 1981. How long ago is that? 30 years? 33 years ago? 30, that's not a long time, really, for building, is it? How long has this building been here? Well, I remember this was built. Before that, we had what we call the old auditorium. Yeah, it was old. It was interesting. It had a slanting floor. You remember that? That was kind of nice because if you fell asleep, you'd roll to the front. If you go to Bulgaria today, this is what it looks like. Completely desolate, completely abandoned, boarded up, falling apart, full of graffiti, even some English graffiti. It was going to last forever as a monument to the power of communism and its ideals. If you go inside this building today, this is what you see. These are all once glorious mosaics of communist leaders, Lenin, Stalin, others, Bulgarian functionaries, Marx. Ruin today. A ruin, a complete ruin. 30 years after that which was to be eternal fell apart in a period of 30 years. What's going on here? Well, truth must embrace eternity. It must embrace eternal concepts like love and joy and peace, and all the things that really make for human fulfillment made possible by God, fall apart, break, grow old, or blown about the winds of the world. Nothing remains. And so we can't really take truth out there, stuff it into some ecclesiastical museum. It's too dynamic for that. Jesus said it's like trying to put new wine in old wineskins. Every time we try to capsulize it flees from us, and we lose it because it's dynamic and living and is to embrace the life of the person. So truth is a celebration of life, a victory for what is real. Instead of trying to embalm it, let's embrace it, live it, and celebrate it as an ongoing, living factor in our lives. There is no doubt then that it's true, all that is false will fall. And only the truth will stand. I think James is really trying to help us see how important that is as a concept. The oaths were attempts to make something truer than something else, which is not possible. It's either true or it isn't. There are gradations of meaning as we add from our viewpoints that's true on some truth. But the one truth that doesn't need any addition is the truth that God sees and that God brings into our lives in the person of Jesus. To try to understand the truth without knowing Jesus is an impossibility, for truth is in Jesus, Paul says. So truth is something dynamic to be embraced, but it also, if you think of it, it's the way things really are spiritually. It's how they really are. Now, if you think of truth as some ecclesiastical concept that has to be explored by doctors of the faith, you're way off base. It's not some territory to be explored by scholastics. It is rather a lifestyle to be embraced as a way of defining and living out all that really counts. It's a tough thing. The composer, Paul Hendren, in talking on inspiration, said, for the musician, the composer, like myself, it's as if one day or one night you're outside in a beautiful setting, but you can't see a thing. Then there's a flash of lightning, and suddenly everything is illuminated. Everything is clear. Our job then is we saw in a flash of light. That would be a tough task. We don't have to do that. What we recall is what we see in the life and teachings of Jesus. That enables us to be able to live the truth ourselves. Well, God bless all of you.